changed our schedule and opened it up to a town hall where our parents could come in and actually hear the information, both sides of the story, and they could, make a decision based on the facts. So that's the purpose of the meeting, is really to gather information for our parents so that they can better understand this decision. And so we are going to try to stick very closely to the time. We want to make this as efficient as possible. So there are ground rules that we have in place, and I'm going to allow Ms. Barkley to explain those. So that way, again, we can get you out of here by 8:30.
Okay, so on the backs of your agenda, you have our ground rules, and we use these ground rules for all of the meetings, pretty much most of the meetings that we have at Clemente Middle School. It's a way for us to work efficiently while gathering input and also hearing people's voices. So we're asking that we begin and end on time. So we started promptly at 7 o'clock. Our time to end is 8:30. You have time limits on each part of the agenda. So when we get to the question and answer portion, you'll have time limits there as well. We're asking that you be additive and not repetitive. So during the question and answer portion of the agenda, we will have a charter that will be charting information on the board behind us. So if you will please pay attention to what's charted and that you continue to be additive with comments and questions and not repetitive in nature. It would make the meeting be very effective. And then we also ask that you trust the process. One of the things that we're going to share with you is the process that we're going to go through, where we are in the process now, and what the next steps are. So we're asking respectfully that you trust that process. Monitor your airtime. So we're asking for your comments to remain at 2 minutes. And last but not least, listen to learn. That means that you understand that there are varying perspectives, but you want to listen to what other people are saying to learn their perspective on this particular issue. The reason that the PTSA has invited so many different people to this meeting is for us to be able to gather input in order to make a decision. A decision will not be made this evening. We will gather the input and use the input that is given here this evening to come to consensus. And there is one body that will make that decision, and that's the instructional council, along with the administrative team, that will come to consensus around this particular issue. And that will determine whether we move forward in the process. But I do believe that there is a large elephant in the room, and there could be a large elephant in the room for some of us. And Roberto Clemente Middle School has been in the news in the last several days. And I did send a letter out to the community on Friday evening at approximately 5 o'clock. And it was about an incident that occurred at Roberto Clemente Middle School back on September 30th. And as a part of that letter, I shared that we would be discussing next steps. So I wanted to share with you that we do have scheduled a meeting. I'm meeting with our PTSA Executive Board on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock so that we can talk about next steps for how we're going to communicate serious incidences in alignment with the changes that NCPS is going to make about notifying parents about things that happen in the school. So I didn't want us to get too far away from that topic because I know it's on the minds and really in the hearts of a lot of our school community, and I know a lot of our parents are there. So I just wanted to give you kind of the next steps for that process, even though it's not a part of the meeting here this evening. So let's move on to the agenda. I've just completed my opening remarks. The next person that comes up is going to be Mr. Gelling, and you'll see that we're pretty much, okay, we have a timekeeper.
We are well ahead of schedule.
We are well ahead of schedule. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Johnson and I will share the role of facilitator. We have a charter. Dr. Offer, will you wave your hand so questions and answers? She'll be charting input. And then we also have a translator. I'm not sure if anyone needs translation, but Ms. Alvarez is out there. She's serving as our translator. So those are the roles for this evening. So Mr. Guilan will come up and he'll talk to us a little bit about the process for what we're embarking upon. Then we have 3 representatives from Verizon or Verizon-like individuals, which will be Rick Novak, Wesley Barfield, Field and Pat Dugan, and they'll share overall information with the work that's been done thus far. And then we have a school representative from Daly Elementary School to give a perspective of a school that has gone through this process already. And then we have an individual from Trinity, is it United Methodist? Trinity United Methodist Church that has gone through this process as well. And then we have time for questions and answers. And Mr. Nelson
Yeah, hi everyone.
is going to have a process for us to use during the questions and answers. So when we get to that part, you'll hear about that. And then I will talk to you about our next steps again, just to reiterate, and then we'll go ahead and close. So
we're not allowed to ask questions while we're talking?
okay, so Mr. Nelson is going to give you cue cards, and you are to write your questions down so that your questions can be answered because we have a process. Ground rules say trust the process. You see the ground rules?
I don't trust that process. We're all adults. Can't we ask a relevant question?
You can write your questions down,
Why
and
do
your
we have to
questions
write
will be
them down?
answered during the question and answer period.
I have another comment, which is this is for 1 hour and a half, and you've given 20 minutes of an hour and a half to parents and the public. I thought you wanted input and dialogue and a conversation with the community.
And what you're doing right now, sir, let me share with you what you're doing. What you're doing right now is you are making this meeting ineffective. We put together a plan, and I am requesting that you trust the process.
I don't trust it.
Okay, if you would like to step out,
No, I
can
don't
speak
want
with
to
you.
step out. I want to know about cell towers. I'm a
And
citizen
you
here.
will. He's the next person on the agenda, and
Yes.
you're derailing the agenda
And
right
also,
now.
she also said they're both sides of the issue. Will we hear both sides?
Yes, you will.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So next up is Mr. Gelling. Yes.
Will you hear from a parent meeting that lives right next to the cell tower?
Well, I don't know who's here to speak. Okay. So I don't know who's here to speak from Daly, but if you are from Daly Elementary School, okay. So I don't know who's here to speak from Daly Elementary School, but there is supposed to be a school representative here. So if you would like to speak during that time period, you have 5 minutes on the agenda. Excellent. Thank you. So next on the agenda is Mr. Gelling from MCPS, who's going to speak to us specifically about the process.
Do we need the lights on for them to see the vendors?
I don't know if we're going to be able to see.
Yeah, I don't think it would be.
So we're good.
Good evening, my name is Pete Guiling, I'm the real estate manager. Proposals from various providers. Just to let you know how this process works. Right up here we have our process map. This process map is available online. You can go to our real estate management team website and find the process map. Right now, we are very early in the process. If you follow the first step in the process as a provider approaching MCPS and saying, hey, we would like to go to a particular location. We talk to the provider, we talk to the principal, and ask them if they're interested in hearing any more about the proposal. That's step 2. Step 3 is a decision whether to notify the telecommunications company whether we will go to that next step. Right now, we're at step 4, which is a PTA meeting. This is strictly for the PTA of the school to get their feedback, to see if they're interested in a cell tower proposal at the school. If you follow the chart along, step 9, we have actually an open community meeting at the school that involves the neighborhoods that surround it, and it's an open public meeting to get the general public's feedback on whether this is an appropriate location for a cell tower or not. So we're very early in the process. Once, or if we get past this step, then we go to our division of construction, actually reviewing the plans that the provider is proposing to see if it's going to work for future school expansion, if there's going to be any obstacles proposed by a new tower on the site that we can't live with, so it might not make it past our division of construction. And then it would go to the larger community meeting. If it makes it past the larger community meeting, then and the principal decides to move forward, we send a memo to our Board of Education letting them know that we have a proposed tower at a particular school and the principal wants to move forward with it. At that time, we begin a negotiation with the provider on a lease. That lease is not signed by MCPS until the tower provider receives all their approvals. So they have to go through special exception approval, approval process with the Montgomery County Telecommunications Advisory Committee, and then depending on where they are and what other impacts there are, they might have to go to a mandatory referral with Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. So there is still a lot of public process involved in a tower going on a particular site, and that even if it does make it through the initial school process, it still has the Montgomery County processes that it's subjected to, where there's additional public input. Any questions on the process?
So what is the time limit we're talking about? How long does it take from the step 4 that we are at now to installation of the tower?
It all depends on the site and what sort of feedback we get. Sometimes it takes 6 months, sometimes it takes a year, sometimes a year and a half. It all depends on how quickly things can move through the process. Some communities are open to it, and and the process moves a little more quickly. Sometimes they're not, and there's other obstacles that slow it down. So again, I'd say 6 months to maybe a year and a half to get through the entire process.
I just have a question about step number 2, what occurred right before here. Could you explain that?
Yeah, step number 2 is after they approach us, we have a meeting with the principal and ask the principal if they're interested in hearing any more about the proposal. We set up a meeting with the provider, we talk to the principal. If the principal is interested in moving forward to the next step, then we go to step number 3 and 4.
So who owns the land that the school is on? Who owns it?
MCPS,
MCPS, the Board of Education?
Board of Education.
So the Board of Education owns the land?
Right.
So why doesn't the Board of Education do a public vote on whether or not a cell tower should go up on the school property? Why is it up to the principal?
Because that's not part of the MCPS process. The MCPS process takes the Board of Education out of that decision.
Whoa, they can't.
Why?
I
We pay taxes
I
for
don't
that.
have the answers to that.
But you
And I
work
think,
there, and you're the real estate agent, so you don't know, right?
again, it's just the way MCPS decided to do the process, and the only time the board is involved is in the approval of the lease.
Did this Board of Education approve the process? They have to.
No, they did not.
Yes, they did.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
Show me the minutes.
Can I
Hey,
share very quickly? What I wanted to say about, as a principal, I don't make decisions in a vacuum. So the sole decision will not lie with me. Part of the reason why we're having this meeting is because I will gather input and come to consensus with our instructional leaders and the PTSA leadership. So we will come to consensus on that. There is a block there that says yes or no about whether the principal wants to move forward or not. I'm not going to make this decision on my own. That's why we're having this meeting and we're gathering input. So when you said why does the final decision lie with the principal, I am trusting this process that if we come together later on as an instructional council after we go through all the input we received this evening, if we come together as an instructional council and PTSA leadership and we say no, I'm believing that our no will be no. But if we say yes, I'm believing that our yes will be yes. So I am trusting the process as the principal of this building.
But But as a principal, you don't own the land, and the Board of Education does. So why the Board of Education is taken out of this step is beyond me.
Yeah, I don't have
And
any
we don't have
control over
any
that.
answers for this. Yes, he's saying that they did vote on it, but you can provide me the minutes for
Not-
that, where you have.
Let me just be clear, in terms of this process map, they did not vote on this process map, but MCTS has a policy, telecommunications facility policy, which is online that the board did approve.
Right, I
And
understand.
this process
No, they didn't approve that either,
is
that's just the
modeled
committee.
after that policy.
The facts that you're giving are not true. Because the Board of Education did not approve any of this. If they did, a lot of people on there would be voted out. They won't put it in front of the public vote.
So I have a question about step 4. It says that the surrounding community, HOAs, and civic associations are invited. How many of those people are invited? How was this meeting publicized?
That's step 9.
I'm reading for the process map, step 4. The principal will schedule an informational meeting with the PTA. The principal will ensure members of the surrounding community, HOAs, and civic associations are invited.
That's right.
Should there be substantial opposition, the principal may decline the request. Should the community be supportive, the provider will begin the formal approval process with local and county government agencies. So I want to know, how was this meeting publicized, and how many of the
I think you're reading from an old process map. This is the one that's currently on the website.
I'm on the website, so.
Okay, well, if you read number 4, that's not what it
I was
says.
reading
She's right, that's what it said. I mean, it's been that way for a long time.
Anyway, if there are no more questions on that.
We're having difficulty reading the map because it's very, very small. Is there a way it can be made bigger, perhaps?
I can attempt to get copies of this map. If somebody if you go onto the MCPS website, under real estate, that's how I pulled it up, under new proposed.
Processes, yes. New sales tax.
So we'll get a copy of this one.
Is this a new proposed process?
I don't know if it's new. I'm going by his leadership. I don't know.
She's reading directly
from the website. She's reading.
This was pulled up from the website. I just literally pulled that up from the website. He led me to it, I pulled it up. So it might be different from what you're reading. But your question was, how did I invite community members? This
Right.
is not that meeting. This is a PTSA meeting. I never invite the community to a PTSA meeting. You're talking about step number 9. We haven't gotten to that step yet. We're at step number 4. So what I did, I allowed my PTSA president to invite the individuals that she thought should be here to share information. So we are presently at a PTSA meeting, not a community meeting. Okay? So right now we're going to move on and we're going to have Mr. Novak. Thank you, Mr. Wright. We're going to have Mr. Novak to come up and share, and after him will be Wesley Barfield. We're doing great with time, so thank you for your patience and your active participation. So Mr. Novak, and then Mr. Barfield, and then Mr. Dugan.
I'm Rick Novak. I'm a consultant real estate manager for Verizon Wireless. I've been instructed as real estate manager consultant for Verizon. I'm directed by our network engineers to find sites that we could potentially lease, zone permit, and eventually install telecommunications equipment towers. We put them on a variety of sites where we need coverage. This was an area that was directed by our network engineer to find a site. We identified the land. There's a process internally with Verizon Wireless. Before I go through the process internally with Verizon Wireless, we talked to the landlords, representatives of the landlords, to get their preliminary buy-in. Under no circumstances has the process at this point reflected that it was an approval. It was strictly a preliminary interest. So the preliminary interest is what it is at this point. I submitted this site to our network engineer. He approved it. And then we had a technical team visit. And we are evaluating location for where we potentially put this monoclonal compound. At this point, we don't know where it's going to be. Furthermore, we don't have a timeline when the site will be built. So that's really the extent of what I do as a real estate manager. I provide information for our network engineers. They process it, and as long as I have preliminary interest, that's where I take it. We know there's a very extensive process thereafter. So, yes.
You indicated there's preliminary landlord interest. You said that.
Well, preliminary representation,
Who's the landlord?
Board of Education.
Okay, so they are involved.
But we're following the whole process of the school at this point. And then again, they're not proposing this, just the process.
But the Board of Education in Montgomery County has given preliminary interest
Yes,
on this project.
That's right.
Is that correct?
I will defer that question to Mr. Dowling and Ms.
Let
Park.
him
Like I just said it.
I will defer this question to Mr. Dowling and Ms. Park. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you want to know preliminary interest, I just want to let you know, everybody I talk to, the parents, they say no. You know, it's not healthy to the kids. And this, we have so many kids in the school.
Excuse me, before we go any further, I think there's someone that's supposed to be taking down questions. So if we can start taking down the questions, I don't want to get lost on that.
Well, here's the thing. The gentleman that's supposed to be giving out the cards just exited to get a copy of the updated thing that you requested. So what we can do is, if Mr. Oatsguard, do you have the cards over there from this?
I do.
Okay, so we're gonna hand out the cards and then you can just jot down your questions and answers. With a chart. We're gonna give those out. You might wanna give a couple, because as the presentation goes along, I appreciate it. And what Dr. Alford is passing out right now is can we make sure?
The real estate management, you want to, here, why don't you look at it?
Let me make sure to see if it's the correct. Yeah, see, this is. That correct? Number 4.
Thank you,
Sure where we are now.
Yes. There you go. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
So what you're receiving right now is a card that you need to write down any questions.
Anyone else need a card?
We'll collect them and try to put them together by topic and question.
Our second
Town hall meeting. You said town hall meeting.
PTSA
Right.
Town Hall.
Thank you.
That's PTSA
Yeah.
Town Hall, which was really.
In my lifetime, town hall has a meeting,
No,
and it's not.
it's PTS, it's not community town hall. Right? And it's really hard to always put it out. But, you know, we. We just want to clear up, it was a PTSA organized event, and like I said, we just be clear again. This was supposed to be our normal executive board meeting, and we changed it so that we could open it up to allow our parents to come in to collect information about this cell tower proposal. This meeting is the first. If we needed to have other meetings, we would do that as well to ensure that our parents were well informed. But this was actually meant to be a parent-teacher, student association, town hall meeting to educate our parents. The community meeting would be something separate. But,
I am very, very committed to listening to what you have to say, but we do have an agenda. Right now, the time is 7:27, and we're within our right time limit. So if we can continue to utilize the processes that we have in place, we'll be able to reach our goal of gathering input. Because we haven't gotten to the question and answer portion yet, and that's where we're actually going to be taking notes and charting your comments. So the more comments we have throughout the presentation, the less input we're going to have to reach consensus later. So I would respectfully request again that you utilize the ground rules that we have in place to trust the process. If you choose not to trust the process, you do have the right to do that, but it very well may impede our ability to do what we need to do to gather the input and be able to come to consensus. So is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I mean, yeah, Paul Dugan's our safety expert, speak next.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Paul Dugan. I am an independent consulting engineer with the firm Millennium Engineering PC. We provide radio frequency design services, and we perform a wide variety of safety services for these types of facilities. I perform certifications of proposed facilities and existing facilities, certified compliance with the federal guidelines. The Federal Communication Commission sets the national standards for compliance with electromagnetic field safety. The standards were not arbitrarily chosen by the FCC, but the FCC has world leaders that specialize in studies of electromagnetic field safety, and they also adopt the recommendations of organizations that perform research of electromagnetic field safety. I prepared a report. Prepared a report. I'm just going to summarize it for you in a few minutes. In a nutshell, Verizon Wireless, when they propose a facility such as this, we're often asked to provide certification of the proposed facility. We perform an upper limit analysis to determine what is the upper limit levels of electromagnetic fields anywhere in the proximity of the proposed facility under all upper limit conditions. What we mean by upper limit is the maximum power that the radios can possibly be transmitting, considering the equipment limitations, and also the maximum channels that they can possibly be deploying, considering their licensed frequency bands. The report has a lot of technical jargon in it. There is, at the end, I think it's on page 2, or actually it's on page 3, it has a more layman's term section of electromagnetic fields. And on the very back of the report, there's also a comparison of these types of facilities with other radio systems that are currently operating in the environment, such as broadcast facilities, radio, police, fire, and EMS type systems. And it shows a comparison not only with base station antennas, but also with household residential devices to demonstrate that these facilities are not amplifying the electromagnetic fields. These lights in this room are generating more electromagnetic fields that we're exposed to than would be a cell tower nearby or on this property. The reason for that is these facilities are only serving a very small geographic area, generally about a mile in radius of the proposed facility location. Is what these facilities are typically designed for. Antennas are elevated above the ground. Nobody can get in close proximity to them, and they're only generating a very, very limited amount of power to serve the needed area. It's only about approximately 40 watts per channel, which is very low in comparison to broadcast facilities. So if anyone has concerns with these facilities, all I ask is you please look at the facts. The facts are that electromagnetic fields have existed for well over a century. These devices are the introduction to smartphones that folks are carrying and using all the time and placing against their head. The bulk of the research today is placed on the use of the handheld against the ear. If you're skeptical of the standards, the bulk of the research is again the use of the handheld. But if you're interested in minimizing your radio frequency exposure, one that's carrying these devices can obviously use a headset or Bluetooth device to separate the distance from the use of the handheld to the ear. The bottom line is the exposure anywhere in the base of the facility, whether you're on a rooftop of the building or nearby one of these types of monopoles. The electromagnetic fields will will be several hundred times below what's considered established as safe levels of electromagnetic fields. And the FCC has established in the Telecommunications Act that zoning boards cannot even consider concerns for electromagnetic field safety in its decisions for zoning approvals for these types of facilities.
Were these standards, are they based on adults or on children?
For anybody.
For anybody? Should that say that in here?
It doesn't apply to, it's not age restricted.
Who paid for this safety for?
Verizon Wireless has retained me.
So this, even though you're an independent consultant, you will get paid by Verizon Wireless for this.
That's correct. But I don't only represent Verizon. I have a license to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public as a responsibility in being a registered professional engineer. My loyalty is to the public as a registered professional engineer. Anybody can hire me. I don't only work for cell carriers.
So have you worked for Board of Education in the past or public, general public, like a PTA, PDSA in the past?
I've been hired by municipal boards. I don't believe I've been hired by a school board directly. I've often come out to speak at school board meetings. I've been to a number of these to address concerns about electromagnetic fields and safety of these types of facilities. But I would certainly, my door is always open to be retained by school boards as well.
I understand that the American Academy of Pediatrics says that children absorb the radiation up to 10 times more in their skull. And they've called on the government to, the American Academy of Pediatrics has stated that children absorb this radiation 10 times in their skull. And they have called on the FCC to update their standards to protect children and pregnant women. Also, the chief of OBGYN at Yale is saying that these standards are not protective of children. They're only 30 minutes, and they were for a 220-pound military man 30 years ago when they were developed. So I'm just curious how the EPA even states they're not for pediatric populations. How do you know that they, they protect children?
Can you try to repeat that
Yes,
question?
yes,
real quick?
summarize
Others
the
may not
question.
have
How do we know that the standards protect children? Because she was saying that a certain entity believes that the children need to be protected because they absorb 10 times more. It is true that the smaller a physical size of a human being, the more absorption there is. And the standards are more restrictive at certain frequencies than others. Everybody has a difference of opinion. But even if you didn't believe the standards were restrictive enough, the exposure level from anywhere near the base of the facility is several hundreds of times below what's considered safe levels of electromagnetic fields. I don't believe there's, again, I've measured under these types of lights and other sources of, other sources of electromagnetic fields, and these types of facilities are far less than other types of household appliances and other sources of electromagnetic fields.
But there's research showing that at 1/1000th of the level, that there is increased leukemia, sterility, and DNA damage, especially to sperm, changed hormone levels, thyroid, sleeplessness, headaches. So that's at 1/1000th of the FCC level, which is why these standards are under reassessment right now. I mean, and as you know, that docket could stay open for a year. So until they come up with a safe level for kids, this is what the FCC said. They said, should we have a precautionary approach, level for children? Then really, we don't know, because our government has asked the question, are they really safe?
Well, what I can tell you is everybody has a difference of opinion. The standards are based on the best available research conducted today. And some folks may be skeptical of the standards, but they are what they are. And as an engineer, I can't stand here and say that anything is safe. Drinking water, I can't say drinking water is safe. But what I do know is the standards are based on the facts, and their standards are based on a substantial margin of safety. And I personally do not have concern for electromagnetic field safety for my children that are in proximity to these types of facilities.
Sir, to answer your question, your answer here, if there is a school that has a cell tower, will you bring your children there? Will you let them go to school there, since the radiation is so low?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I have
Put
no
that on
concerns
record.
whatsoever.
Are there diesel fuel generators? Are there acid batteries that are connected?
Yes,
Let's say the
yes.
cell tower is built here. There are going to be acid batteries
Yeah.
Yes,
and diesel fuel
Yes.
generators and stuff like that.
We'll be using natural gas generators.
Natural gas, not diesel. The acid batteries?
Batteries all contained inside the shelter. So everything like the shape, make sure that presses there.
That's okay.
Here's a picture of a shelter that we're gonna use, somewhat similar to that. All the equipment's going inside that shelter. It's aggregate stone shelter. All the cabinets, equipment, batteries go inside this. So that's how we're going to do it. Generator, natural gas generator will go outside. We're trying to do that at all Montgomery County schools. By environmental evaluation.
Sir, that's a very good answer to a legitimate question. Thank you.
Okay, so can we have a representative from Daly Elementary School come up at this time and share?
Well, I just for the record, I do not work for Daily. I'm a parent, and I live across from Daily, and Daily has a cell tower on there, and I have been following this cell tower since 2006 when it was erected. I wrote down some notes because there is a lot to talk about that no one else will talk about. I will tell you that the process, you are right to question it because our PTA voted no. They went back and said, oh, we need to have a call and call everybody and ask them. So they called, they put one of the robocalls to vote, and all of a sudden it was a yes. It was a resounding yes, and we have a cell tower on there. I will tell you that there are contractors and subcontractors that come onto the school site at any time. They have access 24/7, right?
yep.
They're supposed to check into the school, but I will tell you that I have been at the school at Daly before where there have been subcontractors that have no idea that they're supposed to check in. As we know from the things that are in the news lately about Baker Middle School, where they, and Clemente that has had instances with abuse with children. We do not need any more people that come onto this school property. We do not need the principal to have people traipsing through the office to sign in and have her be a landlord for this. It's not fair to her. MCPS should not even do that at all. Like I said before, the BOE does not put this up in front of a public vote. They do it like this, and it never gets up in front of anybody, in front of the public, because they want it hushed. If they would, we would have all voted the incumbents out at this last election for sure. But they will not put that up there. Most of the schools that have cell towers are farm schools, high farm schools, or what they call focus schools now. You will not see a cell tower in the Bethesda area. You will only see them in schools that have low or high farm rates, which screen reduced meal students. It has low parent participation. As you can see here, there is low parent participation. No one wants to come out. No one wants to make their voice heard.
So the parents here don't want their voice heard.
No, I want you out. What I'm saying is yes, but usually,
I think you're right, you know why? Because I wasn't aware, you know, and a lot of people, like, didn't even know this. First day, like, I was, you know, I didn't know this, you know, so I came in, you know.
So let's allow her to finish. We may not agree.
No, this is a dialogue. Come on. Yeah, this is great.
Not a PTA member.
The school will also receive money. The MCPS gets a chunk of money, and that money is split three ways. A third goes to MCPS in their real estate budget. It does not go to anything that's related to school. It goes into their real estate budget. Then, no, please let me finish. And then a third of it goes to the school, and then a third of it goes to the cluster. So the cluster, who has no risk of having a cell tower on their land, they get money for it. The money cannot be used towards teachers. They cannot
cannot be used, this money cannot be used towards anything instructional. The daily principal has told me that they are going to have more field trips. But I will tell you, as a parent, that is false. They have not used that money for field trips. I don't know what to use it for, because it goes into their general fund, and they just use it for whatever. It could be anything. So the money is not used for school stuff. It can be used it could be used to put into your general fund and pay for teacher breakfasts, which is fine, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to go to students.
What kind of money are you talking about?
For the daily cell tower in 2006, they were getting $10,000. That was their third. And every year after that, it goes up 2.62%, or there's a percentage of the cost of living adjustment or something like that. So I think now they're up to like $15,000 or $16,000 since it's been that long. I will tell you that Daly has not passed their annual yearly progress for their park testing except twice since the cell tower has been erected. So it hasn't changed anything in the school at all. The students aren't getting any smarter, for lack of a better term. What else? Any questions before they cut me off?
You say they receive about 15,000 per year or per month?
Per year. And they get it in an annual chunk. And do they share their revenue? Because they're in elementary school. Do they share their revenue with Well, anyone it's a else? third. It's a third. So there's a whole big chunk, 30,000.
Daly's revenue, does Daly share their revenue with their cluster?
No, the tower will be, for argument's sake, $30,000. That's how much they're going to charge Verizon to put on there. A third goes to Daly, which is $10,000. A third goes to all the clusters in Daly's cluster.
All the cluster schools. Okay.
And then a third goes to the NCPS real estate fund.
My understanding is that there's a moratorium on any cell towers for elementary schools, that Daly looks like one of the only elementary schools.
It is the only elementary school, and there is a moratorium on it now. It should be allowed on any school property.
Oh, he's shaking his head no.
How many cell towers are there on school property?
So much. Sure.
Great question.
I think so.
We were, I appreciate you sharing your point of view. We did not take notes on that aspect. So if there were any specific items that you wanted to share, like from your notes, I would like to include it in our input. What I do know that Mr. Geiling shared with us is that our revenue that we receive from NCPS will be split with our 4 feeder elementary schools. So it will go, a portion of it will go to Germantown Elementary, a portion of it will go to Great Seneca Creek Elementary, a portion of it will go to Copper Mill Elementary, and a portion of it will go to McAuliffe, Crystal McAuliffe Elementary School. So that's how Roberto Clemente Middle School will share its revenue. That's why I asked the question about who Daly shares, because it usually kind of starts at the high school and trickles down. So when it's from the elementary, I was wondering how that happens.
How much are you getting?
Well, we don't have one, so, I don't know what the revenue would be. He said it's about $3,000 a month, but that, I think what Mr. Novak shared with me is that it really depends upon how many providers use the tower, is that correct?
Yeah, the rent for us to install the tower is a $3,000 base for the tower and our equipment. When another carrier comes along and wants to use the tower, Verizon will continue to own the tower. Montgomery County Public Schools will own any land outside of our equipment. So if AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint come along, want to use the pole, they'll put their antennas, do a lease with us, and they'll do a ground lease with MCPS. We just finished a lease agreement with MCPS at Sherwood High School, which has a light standard replacement there on the football field. And that's what we do. And then the rent typically is the same that it is for the carrier that built the pole from MCPS. So the rent doubles, triples every time another carrier comes along.
And so does the land space, because it has to expand.
Yeah, it would expand. That's right. Thank you.
So more carriers, there'd be more income to
The school, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And just to speak to, I will contact the principal of Daly to get some specifics, but from what you shared with me, I assume that the money goes into the independent activity fund. Based upon what you shared, it's not instructional material, so when the money goes into the independent activity fund,
that money is for students. So you can use it for scholarships for field trips, you can use it, to provide transportation or places that they need to go. And I'm not sure how much you guys know about Roberto Clemente Middle School, but we do a lot of on-location learning. And the parents can tell you, we go places all the time. We're always out doing things. And there are a lot of children, we do a lot of fundraising. And when we do this amount of fundraising, there are always children that cannot afford to participate in these activities. We do it now without a cell tower. If we don't have a cell tower, we'll continue to do it. If we do have a cell tower, it may very well make it a little bit easier. But it's not money that makes a difference for children. It's the teaching and learning that goes on in the classroom each and every day. And whether we have a cell tower on this premises or not, it's not going to change the teaching and learning that goes on in the classroom. And that's what makes kids smart. The fact that they know that they can learn, the fact that you have an A+ teacher in the classroom each and every day, that's really what makes a difference.
Do you think it would deter teachers from coming to the school if they had a cell tower on property?
So the schools that have cell towers, and I don't know all of them, but the schools that have cell towers, I don't know of anyone that has not applied to a position or been hired for a position because there's a cell tower. Of course, there's a possibility that someone may do research and say, well, there's a cell tower there, I don't necessarily want to work there. But I mean, I don't know that to be a fact, but I also don't know the opposite of it. So at this point, we're going to move to question and answer. And Mrs. Yes?
There's the church.
Trinity, oh, I apologize. Can you come up for a second? I'm sorry.
That way we can categorize.
Has anyone written down questions so we can start categorizing? Thank you. Thank you so much. You gave us one, we're going to categorize. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Harry Bauer. I'm in the trustees committee at Trinity.
Would you speak into the microphone?
At corner of 118 Poplar Road. And we went through a cell tower process with Verizon. Started about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, when Verizon approached us that they would like to put a tower on the property. We're probably the highest point in Germantown, our lane. So we didn't have a process like what's behind me to follow. Being a church, we had but we developed our own. We went through many of the things I see you struggling with here. Health, safety. We have a daycare operator on our property. They use the church building 5 days a week for the kids. So we weren't going to go forward with a tower if that was against their wishes. We consulted them. They were okay with it. We also were concerned about our neighbors, what they would think. So we reached out to them, gave them a chance to speak. Not the least of which our concerns was our congregants in the church, what they think about having a cell tower on the church property. Well, our cell tower actually is a bell tower. Also, it's designed so it's not a monopole, as apparently we're proposing is here. Our tower is 3 poles in a triangular fashion, and there's shielding around the top. You've probably all seen it. It's prominent in the Germantown area. So we had we formed a committee, formed 2 committees, we studied it, the committee approved, and we went to a more or less a referendum with the church congregation, and we were not going to approve the bell cell tower. By the way, our bell tower is functional. It provided the church more than just revenue. It provided us with identification because we're sort of lost up on the hill. Nobody, I won't say nobody, but it was often not known that we were up there. So we have signage, we have printed United Methodist and cross on our tower. So that was a distinct advantage to us. Our church congregation approved by 2-1 to go forward. The tower's now up a little over 2 years. Probably the best information I can give you is that I think Verizon's a first-class operation. They've told us the truth all the way through. They wanted a happy site. They pay their rent. We were concerned about them coming on the property. It is 24/7. They have to be able to do their maintenance. If it breaks down, they're going to come. But they've been very cooperative and have not interfered with us that I know of. So
1 minute.
I vote for Verizon.
Were you paid to be here tonight?
No.
So how much do you get for your cell tower?
We get, well, we do it a little different. We get $1,800 a month, that was our base rent, and it's going up a couple of times, so it's probably like $1,900 a month. Our tower can accommodate 2 more carriers. We haven't had any more carriers come. We're going to share in that revenue when and if they are
But you're a private land, you're a private owner of your own land. correct?
Yes, we are.
You're not funded by the taxpayers of Henry County?
No. Yeah.
Attendance is optional.
Thank you. So what we're attempting to do now is take the questions and categorize them, but can you give me a category and just give me a couple of them that we're going to ask, and then if you could chart for us?
Do you want me to share kind of a little bit what we're going to do just so everyone understands?
Oh, yes.
One thing that's important is that you at least understand the why behind why we're facilitating this process. Rollins has oftentimes shared that one of the primary purposes of the PTSA is that they are advocates for our school. And so we kind of want to collect clean data around advocacy that we can take back to our instructional council and they can look at. So what we will do is we'll categorize the questions. They're connected around kind of one similar theme when I can. And then what we'll do is we'll capture your response or your reply from the audience, and then we can put all of that together for the instructional council. So this is around safety or protection, versus, selection of the site.
So, okay, so here are the questions about selection of the site. How many gallons in the diesel fuel tanks?
No good, it's natural gas generator we're using.
How many?
How big?
How many gallons?
It's gas, it's a gas line.
Are there gallons of gas?
No, natural gas, it's a gas line. It's run from the D-Mark on the one side of the school. And I'm turned around here at the moment. We'll provide a direct service from, I think it's Washington Gas that's here. It will be a direct service, and we'll pay the monthly use of it directly metered from Washington Gas.
So which side of the school? Then the cell tower has to be on a certain side, right?
Ma'am, to be honest with you, we made a proposal where we wanted to go, and Mike Spur, who's a real estate manager for all the Montgomery County schools, they're all under evaluation. If they plan on expansion, then we have to reevaluate where we could potentially go. So at this point, we don't know where we're going. We got a response back to Mr. Spur through Mr. Geiling. We don't know where we're going yet, and that's still forthcoming. We're in the early stages of this process.
So you don't even know if it's possible?
It's probable, I think, but again, it's subject to the process, and I'll leave it at that. There's a 300-foot setback required from off-site dwelling homes. That's one of the setbacks in Montgomery County, so we have to honor that to start with. Yes, ma'am, from residents.
Thank you. We want to try to get, no, you're not digressing. I just want to make sure that we're able to get through as many questions as possible.
But if another vendor's on the tower, they might have a diesel fuel generator, right? or no?
I can't speak on behalf of the other carriers.
All natural gas.
Oh, you're not allowing any more diesel fuel?
There are no diesel fuel generators on Montgomery County Public School properties.
All natural
There
gas
might be
cars?
one at a very old school, but all of them are natural gas, and we have 229 generators on MCPS property.
Oh, you mean the school
The
generators?
second question, will the school be in the fall zone and will the parking lot be in the fall zone? Will the school and or the parking lot be in the fall zone?
No, it's fall zone. Fall zone with the tower
That's how it
hit.
falls.
There's fall zone as it will hit, will it hit, over, in the fall zone for me means the setback requirement in the property line, or will it be in the parking lot? The answer is no.
So did you, so that if
Well, we
the
haven't
cell tower
determined the location
falls,
yet,
will
so
it
it's-
fall on the school or in the parking lot?
Will the athletic field or any areas where kids are be in the fall?
Can you please not ask follow-up questions? I know you're passionate, but I want to try to get, and people have taken time to write down questions, and they're trying to remain in the process. So if you have additional questions, keep writing. When will the site be selected? How will the site be protected?
Well, it's the selection process on our end, we've had preliminary approval from our network engineer. That's as far as it's gone. The approval, we're at the infancy stages of evaluating what the Board of Education and everybody within that process and the representatives decide what it is.
Would it be, see, this is my question, would it be done before step 9? With the community?
Yes.
That's what I want to know.
So you're
Because
saying
I don't know how you can
everybody
even have input on this until we know where you're planning to put it.
Okay, yeah,
And that's my question.
right. And, but we would have that by step 9?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
You
okay.
might not make it to step 9.
Okay, okay. Did everybody get that? Okay, good. Okay, will the cell tower at Roberto Clemente Middle School be designated as a hazardous materials site by the something department?
Fire department, sorry.
Fire department, thank you. I don't have my glasses on, I'm sorry. What specific hazardous materials will be
Generated?
produced and in what amounts? And what is the plan to mitigate the danger to children?
Can you answer that, Rick? Can you answer that?
Our environmental representative.
I'm with Tri-Leaf. I didn't stand up and speak earlier. Tri-Leaf Corporation, we're an environmental consulting firm working on behalf of Verizon Wireless in this case. As far as what hazardous materials are going to be there are, as you mentioned earlier, there are batteries. One of the things that Verizon proposes to do in this situation to kind of mitigate that, that danger is putting those batteries inside a shelter, so that there were to be some kind of release, which is rare with maintained equipment. But if there were to be, it would be released inside the shelter.
How many Verizon towers are on Montgomery County schools, and has there ever been an incident?
I can't speak to whether there's ever been an incident, not one that I'm aware of. I can only speak to what I'm aware of. As far as how many, did you say 12?
Well, there's 12 sites, and we have 30 providers, and there's 12.
Placement and spacing. There is a toner half-mile away at IWLA. Start with multiple carriers.
I don't know if they have a cell tower on the property.
Okay, okay.
Oh, so it'd be really close. Yes, okay.
So what's the
I don't know if it's a question, it is a statement, but if anyone can clarify, it's placement and spacing where the tower is being a half mile away. That I can walk.
Oh, they're saying there's one really close to here, so why do we need one here?
We're already, Verizon Wireless is
How
already
will
at
they,
that site.
I guess,
We're already co-located on that site. We need further coverage in this
because
part
we're
of
maxed
Montgomery
out
County.
there?
And then this, so we finished with that category. Now we're on to the category entitled
Safety.
Safety. Can you prove it is safe? Can anyone prove that it's safe? Yes.
Let me just say, you can't prove that something cannot have a potential impact, but look at the facts. The facts are that these facilities exist throughout the globe at schools, hospitals, medical facilities, office buildings, apartment buildings, and I'm not aware of a single incident today where something is negative coming out of these facilities. Folks can choose not to believe that, but I have no, someone asked me, would I have a problem with my children coming to school with a cell tower. Quite the contrary, I would want my children to be able to have service for their devices if they need to be reached in the event of an emergency.
And I'd like to say that my son goes to a school that has a cell tower. He's in the 11th grade at Wheaton High School, and they do have a cell tower.
But you're only speaking to RF. There's also the issue of climbing the tower, et cetera. Tires catch on fire. There's a lot of other safety. You're just speaking to one issue, right?
Well, the question was, is it safe?
Right.
And yeah.
But he
Okay,
only
here's
spoke to
another-
RF.
Here's another safety question, and this is, can you prove that this radiation is safe?
Can I say that it is a Class 2B carcinogen according to the World Health Organization, and that goes for both cell tower radiation and cell phones, so all the wireless devices. I mean, it is classified, and Robert Band, the secretary of the World Health Organization Working Group, has stated that officially. So this might be what you call an environmental exposure, but it's so it's full body and maybe less than the phone to the head. But if in the 10th year you're seeing the increased cancer, and there's also, of course, a lot of cell tower studies, but I'm not going to go on and talk about all the studies that show increased cancer, headaches, and other things. But that's really what's telling is the experimental studies showing DNA damage and cancer that are very concerning.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything?
Just to say that, can you prove it's safe? As an engineer, I can prove that it complies with federal guidelines for safety by hundreds of times.
And your response to that would be that the federal guidelines need to be updated, right?
According to the American Academy of Pediatrics and several medical organizations, they are very concerned. And you can go online if you want to read, and you can read the submissions of doctors, and that might be useful for anyone interested in what they have to say.
Okay.
Especially, I just want to comment, I'm so sorry. And maybe, like, so far the research, I'm not sure your data, so far research maybe doesn't prove, like it has a hazard or something, but how do we know? After 20 years, can we, afford to risk our children's, health?
Yeah,
We don't know.
We don't know. You're
So
right.
then, in that case, as parents, we are against it, we are.
Well, okay, so let me say this to you. Right now, we're gathering input. You may be against it, but that's why we're gathering input. We hear you, but when we gather input, we will then come to consensus. We'll use your input to come to consensus to make a decision. But just because you're against it, doesn't mean that everyone's against it.
No, I think,
And I hear you.
I can get, like the signatures, to the school, or to the community.
Getting signatures to the school is not a part of the process. So if you would like to do that, then that would be fine. But what I'm saying to you is that we have developed a process, and the process is to gather input as PTSA and take the input that we gather from the meeting with the PTSA, which is what we're doing now, and come to consensus. So that's the process.
So you mean like?
So I'm gonna go on with the questions and answers that the parents here have asked. Board of Education is supposed to grant land for school use for children. It is not understood how the Board of Education has approved of installation of a monopole on school grounds. Do we have proof of the board's approval, and will it be in the interest of future school expansion, if any?
Good question.
The only thing I can say is that the board delegated its authority to the schools and the PTA to make
Date and time, please.
The final decision is made by the superintendent.
When did the board delegate, please? You could date and the minutes, because that just doesn't exist.
I don't.
No, you don't. I know. It's okay.
So that was
They don't sign the leases.
In terms of the decision making,
They approved the leases.
No, they
They approved them.
They never do.
All the cell tower leases go to the Board of Education.
That's never happened.
And they tell us when. They do. So.
does the Board of Education, the board members at a board meeting, are they involved in the decision-making process?
They approve the lease for each site.
They do not, I have a lease right here, and it's not by the Board of Education.
Unbelievable.
There are multiple leases that do not have the board's name on
Is it possible that we move on to the next question?
I think so. I don't think so. That's a point. The question is a very hard one.
Lease goes to the Board of Education.
What a process.
Why is Clemente Middle School considering or interested in exposing students to a cell tower? There is a moratorium on any new cell towers for elementary schools. Middle school communities throughout the county have rejected these towers. Why Clemente? Well, when I was approached by this, I didn't feel that as the principal of the building, I should make this decision in a vacuum. So when I was presented with the proposal, I felt like it was important to move forward to see what my PTSA thought, and then to see what the community thinks. So I am not an individual that makes decisions in a vacuum, so I wanted to make a collaborative decision that would be built around consensus. I don't know why Verizon chose the Clemente Middle School specifically, but what was shared with me is that they need more cell phone towers in this area, and that then they chose the Clemente Middle School. What I have done is I've asked schools about the revenue, like for instance, Farquhar Middle School, I've asked Mr. Titleman about the revenue that he's receiving, and he does get consistent revenue. I don't remember the number that he told me, and he uses it for student activities. So I know what happens in our school in terms of the needs for revenue and the number of fundraisers that we do here in the building. But I also hear the comment about the fact that schools that have a significant number of free and reduced meals that are kind of touted for this. I mean, our free and reduced meals rate is 30-some%. And we do have schools that have a higher rate of free and reduced meals. So for that particular scenario, it doesn't really work for the middle school. So that's my answer to that. This is the last one. Oh, this is the last of that. NCPS has banned cell towers at elementary schools. Why are cell towers okay for 6th graders but not for 5th graders?
Again, the site depends on the size of the property and whether it can accommodate the tower. So depending on where they eventually can site go on the property, depending on whether it's full or not. We've had
Just as an aside, Montgomery, I've only been here for 34 years. The people who have money in Montgomery County, how many cell towers are, let's say, Bethesda,
Zero.
Chevy Chase,
Zero.
River Road?
Zero.
Like, are there cell towers down there where the money is?
Not on the school sites.
Oh my God, what a surprise there now.
And the
Oh. Wow.
high school, the PTA, what they all guessed, so they didn't do it. No, the PTA from Newton High School.
What a
That's right.
surprise.
Parents, lots of parents showed up, they guessed it.
Thank you. The next question is, as a parent, I do have safety concerns with this proposal. Any safety, in particular, safety with respect to children and developing ages, has been thoroughly assessed with scientific evidence demonstrating no safety concerns for children ages 11 to 14. Why do you consider a site close to a middle school?
Why would we consider a site? It's my understanding that at this point, the school will consider us providers to use the middle schools. And I ask the question, I get an answer, and then we start the process. But it's only an inquiry, it's only a degree of interest that we receive whether we can move ahead. The why Daly was built initially, I don't know what the process was and what happened there. But we know that we get all the approvals, the support from the community, through the principal and the PTA, that we can use the middle schools and high schools.
How many towers are on school land? In Montgomery County?
That question is coming up.
Well,
Question
thank
is
you.
coming up, so then we won't have to ask that
It's in the
question.
queue.
You got it already. Okay, is the principal for or against the cell tower? The principal is in the process of gathering input, and as we are gathering input, the principal will make a decision as we come together over consensus. Can the tower be taken down if class 2B carcinogen status changes to, yes, it causes cancer? Can it be taken down because other communities have this in the lease?
They do.
And tied to that, if it's a yes answer, how long is the lease? For how many years?
Forever.
So the question was, if you could allow us to allow them to answer, the question is, can the cell phone towers be?
No, I apologize.
Let me just address that. All leases have provisions that if there's any safety issues with the towers, then they can come down. MCPS has the right to have those towers come down.
How long are the leases?
5-year leases.
How many is on a county?
Usually 2 5-year
What's it?
options, usually.
Well, they're not doing that, they're putting them in the smaller repeaters.
15, 20-year lease.
5-year lease with renewal options, if we elect to.
5-year lease with renewal options. 5-year lease with renewal options.
Oh, okay, yeah, I got renewal forever, got it.
How did Wooten successfully propose a proposed cell tower? Can I try to answer that based upon my learning this evening? Can I try to? Okay, so when we looked at that process map, I assumed that once they got to the community meeting, they gathered input and said no. That's why they did not successfully have this proposed cell tower. Is that right?
It was a PTA meeting and they said no.
Okay.
It was a PTA meeting.
Like this one?
Yep.
But this is,
I'm gonna add this.
That's a meeting, right?
So did you want to?
If they go.
They won't vote. That they won't vote.
Does the process, would you like me to wait? Because I know you guys want to hear these questions. Keep reading this. Does the process allow for representation from those opposed to cell towers on the public school grounds? So I would say that the process does allow for that when we have a community meeting. Okay, that's step 9. See, I'm really learning. It is not fair that you are only presenting one side. Thank you. No categories. If you have more questions, we have about how many more minutes?
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay. Does the revenue received reduce the school budget, or is it really additive to existing ongoing budgets?
In terms of the share that comes to the real estate management team, I know that's come up. Real estate management fund supports lease space of Montgomery County. So we have administrative office space where we're paying somewhere around $3.1 million a year in rents. All of the funds that we take in, whether they're from cell towers, whether they're from daycare providers in our school, whether they're occupants that are in our closed school, all that rent money supports the rents that MCPS has to pay out for its administrative spaces.
I think the question was about our school. Do our funds stay the same that we would have gotten if we didn't have a cell phone tower, or they go down? That's right.
Well,
The school gets some sort of allocation, right, with the budget. I don't know much about the
You
budget
mean the
process.
school
The
itself?
school gets an allocated budget. Is this money that comes in really additive to that budget, or does that, you just get the same
Allocation
budget?
doesn't change. My school allocation, if we had a cell tower, my school allocation does not change. My allocation is based upon the number of students. And it doesn't go down or go up based upon the fact that we have a cell tower. Okay? Can the school design how the tower will look? A fake tree, a bell tower?
Part of this decision, we'll have the input of our network engineer, and then it would be addressed with Montgomery County Public Schools. And from there would be a mutual agreement with some design.
The question is, who is part of the instructional council team that is part of the decision-making process? So on the instructional council, you have the leaders of all the different departments: English, math, science, social studies, electives, world languages, PE, and health. You have 2 team leaders per grade level, so 2 6th grade team leaders, 2 7th grade team leaders, 2 8th grade team leaders. You have the 2 elected faculty representatives who are a part of the union. You have the elected supporting services representative who is a part of the supporting services union. We have 3 parents that sit on, four parents that sit on instructional council, and then you have, thank you, and then you have all of the administrators. Did I miss anybody? And counseling services, so we have a resource counselor there. So it's really like a representative body that will be a part of the process.
Are they here, are they all here tonight to hear this?
No, they're not here tonight to hear this, but we will take this input and we'll all get together to come to consensus. So they will hear this, the input that was received this evening. Okay, so this is a lot of questions. So which individual expressed first interest in installing cell tower at RCMS? Was it Verizon that said expressed interest first? Yes. Okay, so the answer to the first part is Verizon was the first person to express interest. Why was the Maryland Coalition of Parents Against Cell Towers in Schools not invited to this meeting? The answer to that question is because it's the PTSA meeting. They will, I assume that they'll be invited to the community meeting.
No.
Who organizes the community meeting?
You do.
The principal?
Yes, ma'am.
I invite the homeowners association?
That's the process.
Working with the provider.
Working with the provider?
Provider help get the school. It goes through the school, but the provider provides.
Okay, well, thank you.
Just some extra.
Okay, why were only people supporting the cell tower invited to be present? Ms. Johnson, did you guys make a decision about who you invited?
We invited people that we knew of. You know, again, this was our first meeting, and we knew about Trinity Church. Huh? I know what the meeting, but again, these were people that we knew of. We had gotten some of the information from the coalition, and we knew that stuff was online, but we wanted to start out, let's try to collect the facts. We invited Daly's PTA, because I wanted the parents' position and opinion on that. And then we also, like I said, Trinity, because we just wanted somebody's testimony so that we could understand it. The intent was not to leave out anyone. We were not trying to deceive anyone. We were really trying to start this process with something. And if, like I said, if we need additional meetings to collect more information for our parents, then we will coordinate that. But this was just our first start at it, our first cut at it. And again, these were the people that we came up with, because this meeting was done very quickly. Like I said, this was done last minute. This was supposed to be a board meeting for us. So we wanted to get who we could here, Verizon, MCPS, and then anybody that could give testimony to help us bring our parents to a point of understanding. So no, it was not an intent. It was no conspiracy. There's no scandal here. We're not trying to leave people out. We want facts on both sides.
Is that it?
It is the end of our Q&A session.
Okay, so I have next steps. So I'm going to use, because we already went through the process map, so I'm going to use my 5 minutes for these couple more questions, and then you can close the door. Okay. Why was the real estate management cell tower process map not distributed ahead via the invitation email? Same with the report paid by the Verizon Wireless. Why wasn't that sent out ahead of time? I don't think we had it.
We didn't have it.
Okay. What is the resource of your data coming from?
Where's our data coming from?
Where is the data coming from? Yes, your report. Where's your data coming from?
Data for the needs of the site or data for the?
All the
safety
data.
issues?
Yes.
Well, the operating parameters are what they are. They're outlined in my report as far as the power output, the frequency band that they operate, number of antennas, channels, and so on. As indicated, I described the upper limit of those parameters in my report.
So the question is, how can we ensure that, like Daly Elementary School, a no from PTA at RCMS after a robocall does not magically resounding yes? Well, I don't do votes by robocall, so that won't happen here, because I don't do that. When you said, how can you ensure that it won't happen? Oh, I'm sorry, somebody else. Well, whoever had the question, I don't do votes by robocall, so I can tell you that's definitely not going to happen.
That won't
For me,
happen.
that's not fair.
They don't have a quorum.
Ms. Barkley, in your opening remarks, you said this was going to be a PTSA town meeting, and I wrote down, you said, and there would be both sides of the issue. That's what you said. So where's the other side of the issue?
The daily speaker was the other side. She's giving you a realistic, real world
Well,
testimony.
you might want to invite that Maryland coalition.
Yes, she's here.
We're
And
here.
there's information here. I'll share that.
We're-
We're here. My closing remarks. There's information on the table from Maryland coalition. Here.
Maybe I can come in a meeting, but thank you. What will happen when the tower is obsolete? And why not use like
Repeaters.
radio band?
Repeaters.
Repeaters like radio band.
Yes.
Thank you. Why not use repeaters like radio band?
This is the technology and how we are able to maintain our network. How it is where we suspend the antennas up in the air, how it transmits and receives, is the technology and the way they perform. It's very simple, and that's how, the only way I can explain without being a network engineer. If there was a simpler way of running it underground or whatever, we would do that. This is the way they do to maximize their network. So you can receive a call, drop calls, and you're able to use your data. It's the best answer I can give you.
But the question also is, these towers are obsolete. These are for data, they are not for reception. These are not for reception. These are for data. So if they are for data, we use repeaters like they use for the radio band in the subway. Why can't those be used underground with different spots? And there is no radiation. And if these towers are obsolete in 5 years, who will take them down or will they stay up there? That's another question. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, just a question, if the towers have to come down, with each tower that goes up, we require a $50,000 bond from the provider. So they have to take the tower down. If for some reason they're not able to, we have a $50,000 bond to be able to take that tower down.
okay, so there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions that we did not get to. And it says Farquhar Middle School is not a high farm, low income school. Why did Neelsville propose to get refused last year? How is the community alert of the meeting?
Say that again, that last question, excuse me.
I'm just reading off those questions. We're not going to answer them two at a time. What would the process be for vetting subcontractors on MCPS process? And opinion, MCPS does not need additional contractors and subcontractors on the MCPS process. Can we have a show of hands of people against the cell tower and for the cell tower? How can Clemente pay for its own safety report? And last but not least, what is the percentage of non-high farm rate schools versus high farm rate schools does Verizon contact? So what we're going to do with those last questions is we're going to make it a part of our input and try to answer those questions, because I've been talking to Mr. Novak and Mr. Guyland, so I'll try to do that research, so we'll have that information when it's time for us to move on to our consensus building through instructional council. You're going to be the last word before we close, sir.
Respecting the process, I do want to show, could you have a show of hands, people that are for the cell tower that are here right now?
That's
What if we have a
People that want the cell tower on the site. If one of the questions is to show of hands, people that are for, and people that are against, that's not something that you can collect later.
Sir,
Yeah.
with great respect, that is not a part of the process. This is not, we were not attempting to show people for and for against. We were attempting to gather input. That's not a part of it. That's not a part of the input.
I think that's important to have. You have X number of people here.
So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to bring up Ms. Johnson, and she's going to give our closing remarks.
There's one hand went up again.
Amazing. Raise your hand.
He's got a question there.
I have one question. Mr. Johnson,
I'm gonna leave it alone.
that you have a minute of my time.
I just think you should vote. I think people should know. Raise your hand and say if you support, it's against. And I think if you listen to PTA, everybody should know. It's not that hard. Huh?
No, we don't have, no, the intent here was not to vote. It is just to collect information. People need to go. No, I hear what you're saying, if you want to vote amongst yourselves, that's fine. But I, as a parent, I want time to go and research this. I want to look at the information on this table. I want to do research on, FCC regulations. I want to find out what the Board of Ed's involvement is, and if all of this has to be considered before I raise my hand and say yes or no.
Look, I gotta say, the board has preliminary interest. We heard about board preliminary, this would be a preliminary vote.
Let me answer my question. I will allow you, I will let you know that I have taken some very good notes. And if you want to take a vote amongst yourselves, that is fine. But we're gonna wrap it up because that's not what we came here for. I didn't want to come here for a vote. I don't want people to commit prematurely to something that they have not really taken the time.
Well, you want to know about Wooten? Wooten took a vote, that's how they stopped it.
But
it wasn't in the process.
They took a vote anyway.
Very good point. Very concerning point.
I'm only
that I wanna
teasing
bring
you.
back.
No, they just took a vote.
So I have a question that says, PTSA meetings must be open to the public. They are not reserved for RCMS PTSA members exclusively. That is correct. Our meetings are open, and I hope to see all of you at our meeting in December. It is the second Tuesday. You are welcome to come anytime.
When's that community meeting that everyone's talking about?
Well, we're not in that process.
That's gotta be organized by the
That we have to have consensus through instructional council as to whether we're going to move forward with the input that we receive this evening. So I will not be able to organize a community meeting unless I know that the body of instructional council members wants to move forward. That's the body that will
But if they move forward by December, January next year, next spring.
It really depends, because the conversation I had with Mr. Novak, was it yesterday? Yesterday, he said that Verizon has kind of been on hold with this whole process, that they're not planning to move forward right now. But I wasn't willing to not have this conversation this evening, because if they come back in 2 months and say, okay, well, we're back on, we have a budget for it, I didn't want to halt the conversation, because I know it's important. I wanted to have the conversation, have the input, and once we come to consensus, when we come to consensus, if we say, no, we don't want to move forward, we won't have a community meeting. If we say we do want to move forward, we will have a community meeting. So I thank you so much for your time and attention, and more so passion, because I think that we all agree that the underlying issue here is whether or not our students are going to benefit from having a cell tower in Clemente Middle School. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We got a round of applause.
That's why Wooten did a show of hands and that was the end.
I wasn't.
Ah, there you go.
I like you.
Yes.